Support comes from the Missouri Forest Products Association, honoring Arbor Day on April 26th, with an ongoing commitment to sustainable stewardship and conservation of Missouri's forests. ChooseWood.com.
Welcome to St. Louis on the Air. I'm Sarah Fensky. 4 years ago, two St. Louis moms founded a small group to tackle a big problem. Adelaide Lancaster and Laura Horowitz wanted We Stories to help foster conversations about racism and race with white families and children. They found a big, receptive audience. Hundreds of families joined We Stories cohorts across the city. And now the group is going national. This June, for the first time, We Stories began hosting a national cohort. Another begins next month. And We Stories is already seeing reservations fill up for a third. And here to discuss the group's growth from St. Louis to beyond is Rhema Anazonwu. She is We Stories program manager. Rhema, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much, Sarah. It's great to be here.
So what led We Stories to expand its focus beyond St. Louis?
So it has always been something that we have talked about as an organization. Many of our families in St. Louis have families outside who have heard about We Stories and are always asking us, when is We Stories coming to a city near me? And so just because we've been a small nonprofit and, been so overwhelmed and grateful for all of the families in our St. Louis community who have spread the word about us so far, but just wanting to make sure that we're able to maintain and support the families that we have in the past and, the families that might join in the future. It's always just been a tension that we've held as an organization of we would love to come to a city near you, but also we want to make sure that we're doing it in a way that we can scaffold and support both the community that we have in St. Louis and then whatever community that we built afar. So at the beginning of this year, in February, we decided, all right, let's go ahead and try a remote cohort. Mm-hmm. And it happened so serendipitously with the pandemic hitting because everybody just kind of was like, oh, well, this is what we want now. And we had already had the beginning plans that were rapidly accelerated when it was oh, this is just going to be the mode of instruction, period. So been in the works a while, but just beautiful timing all around.
Yeah, it feels like everybody getting used to doing everything on Zoom or through that kind of connection probably eased your way a little bit. Were you torn between trying to choose a group where everybody was in the same city versus branching out to people from different cities all in that same group?
So within we call it our national cohort, we do try to make people who are in the same geographic area known to each other. So we have a clustering of families in Minnesota, for example, or some on the East Coast. And so we try to facilitate introductions between those kind of those families. But also, it's just been so striking to us in the past cohort, the almost 12 weeks now, of just seeing as much as all of the different contexts that our families are raising their kids in. There are so many similarities that come up when you're trying to have conversations about race with kids and just finding a lot of, oh, wow, that feels so similar to me here in St. Louis and to people in Washington, D.C., having the same conversations across lots of different issues. The applicability of it has been really just, one of those things that you think about, but seeing it actually play out has been incredible.
So it sounds like you're actually seeing more similarities from people all over the country than differences by region or by city.
Definitely.
So this national program, this is called the Family Learning Program. I understand it's 12 weeks. You started in June, so it's underway now. What is the goal to accomplish within that time frame?
So the goal is really just to get families comfortable with the discomfort of having explicit conversations about race. White people, and really to an extent, all of us were socialized to not have conversations about race, especially explicit ones, because it's taboo. when research really bears out that the opposite, explicit conversations, will reduce racial bias, especially in kids. And so that is our goal. We tell our families, you're building a habit here, because anti-racism work is a lifelong journey. And it's not just, oh, I've read one book and I'm done, but it's, okay, what is the practice? What kind of questions can I be asking in any situation that I'm walking into or my kids are walking into? And so that's really the goal of the 12 weeks, to get families to start or strengthen their practice, having conversations about race as a family, and then, expanded to whatever networks they're in.
So walk me through that. How does that go over that 12-week period? Where do you start and where do you end up leading these people?
Sure. So the first month, we've got a 3-month curriculum, and there's far too much information for a 3-month period, just because the history of race in our country, and the fact that race is so dynamic and operates differently within different racial groups. It's a lot. And the habit building is so important, because even though we can present all the information, there's no way that families who are also living in a pandemic and also having to parent can metabolize all of that. So we encourage families to do one highlighted module within the whole work and then come back to it again. So month 1 is all about noticing. And what do you notice about the environment that you're living in, that you're maybe going to school in? It's going to look a little bit different now, but who is present, who is missing in those environments, even if it's something as simple as your neighborhoods or where you go to shop. What does that look like, and how could it look differently for the kids or how does it look differently for the characters in the children's books that you're reading? And so that's month 1, just noticing, getting comfortable naming difference, because colorblindness is, what a lot of us have been socialized with. It's not we are all the same, so we don't need to name the differences of skin color, but that's really, again, not having explicit conversations. And so if there are differences, we want people to be comfortable talking about them and saying, oh, this is what color my skin is. What is the color of the character of this book? And so then month 2 and month 3, they're more take a specific part of this really, long winding avenues of what does the history of my neighborhood look like? Or what's the family history tell me about what role my family has played in America? Or let's learn some history about civil rights movement, and just asking questions that go along with picture books that go with some of those categories. So we have the 4th of July over this cohort, which is always time that we ask, can you hold multiple truths of America? Because an American ideal is just that America is this great country, but it is also built on stolen land. And so holding those two tensions, how do you do it? And how can you tell a fuller picture of what America looks like? So that's just the starting place, because there's so much history, but really we want to kind of model for parents. Here is a place that you can start, and you will always have access to come back to learning about the other ones that you didn't do in this 12-week period. And you'll also probably learn more about the ones that you did do in this 12-week period, because I'm always learning new things about race, and that's just kind of how it goes.
So speaking of that follow through, you talked about noticing, and then you have sort of a specific part that people are tackling. Is there then a call to action, or with that age group, is it more just a state of learning?
So that is actually something that we are working on building out right now, because for so long, we've had the family learning program as our core program of, okay, this is just to get you started on the learning, and that over time, our alumni families, that's what we call people who've gone through the program, they have kind of made their own paths into advocacy. We've had people run for school boards, we've had people canvass for different elections, do different anti-racism work within their own schools or school districts. And so the path afterward has always been pretty murky. And right now we are building out an advocacy building project of what does advocacy look like? It sounds, even to me, who I've got some familiarity with it, it sounds really big and scary, but naming, like writing a letter to your representative, that's advocacy. Or more specific, like we have lots of people who've done work in their schools, and creating a more explicit pathway for people who are interested in that is a focus of what we have been doing this summer, what we will continue to do for the next year, of just where do we go afterwards.
So helping people understand there are small steps you can take. You don't have to jump in with both feet. You can do your part.
Absolutely. And that action begets action. So like when you do the small steps, you feel more ready to do like another small step. And then you look back and you're like, whoa, I've come a really far away from just those first couple of small steps.
So we mentioned that this was targeted at families and targeted at families with young children. What age are you most seeking for this?
So research tells us that bias is cemented by around age 7. So our target age group is 0 to 8, just because we are rooted in children's books and we want you to read them together as a family. And a lot of those habits exist within our families already with kids in that age range. But we do get families who have kids like 14, like 11 to 14 is not uncommon, because the older books that we do offer, like, they are dense, and there is something to learn here, because, even though 0 to 7 is the intervention age, like there are lots of lessons to learn beyond that.
So I'm thinking about that targeted age there, that 0 to 8. I feel like my 5-year-old does great if she's in a room with her teacher and with other kids. She's really focused on what's going on. But when I try to get her to pay attention to something going on the computer screen, man, her attention span just isn't what it needs to be. She's just kind of all over the place. Has that presented challenges with kids that age as you're trying to do this national cohort?
That is, so the challenge of like, I feel like I care deeply about this and I want my child to also, that presents itself. The way that our curriculum is rolled out is that it's not done on screen time. So it's mostly parents who are metabolizing the information that is presented on a screen, but then taking it back to their kiddos and saying, okay, well, we're going to read a book now. And we liken it to manners. There's a researcher, Ellie Michael, who did this great metaphor for us of, you would practice, you'd say please and thank you with your children, even though you don't always hear please and thank you. And even though it's not the thing that they want to hear from you, but just making, like, we help our kiddos build habits that we want them to then perpetuate beyond us. And so having that structured family time of, okay, well, we read books and we have discussions about current events or things that are tied to the calendar, because they will always crop up.
That makes sense. Yeah. So the adults are doing their part on Zoom, and then they're dealing with the kids in one-on-one. They are their own pod, basically, as they're doing that.
Absolutely.
We're talking to Rhema Anazonwu. She's the program manager for We Stories, which has recently gone national. The first national cohort is underway right now. I understand you're going to be launching a second one in September. Is there anything you've learned from this first time around where, you might just do this differently now that you've tried this once?
We've learned that the Zoom format has been wildly successful, just in that over 12 weeks, we do see parents who get distracted by the rest of the world and parenting and all of their responsibilities as it goes. But we have, since we're not able to do anything in person, and we never were going to be able to with this group anyhow, we have done bi-weekly Zooms where we just check in and talk to people. And we have heard in the past that having small group conversations is some of our participants' favorite parts. And so we've upped that by 6-fold. And creating 6 more opportunities to have a small group conversation. We didn't know it was going to work. And so that is one thing that we'll definitely be keeping.
So people are really into that. They want to have those conversations.
Which has been surprising, just because, Zoom fatigue. And so I wasn't expecting for it to work out as well as it has,
Hmm.
which is kind of like the opposite of your question, but that's the first thing that jumped out to me.
But that's great. I mean, man, if you're learning like, hey, this is working, that's also something to learn. So, as you're looking ahead to this next cohort, what kind of demand are you seeing for it?
Basically, a similar one. So this cohort, a similar one as our summer cohort. So our summer cohort launched just right in that protest moment around George Floyd's murder.
Mhm.
And our fall cohort, we have a St. Louis and national one. Both of them filled up with 100 families each by the end of June. And so, like, there's still a lot of energy. People were still being catalyzed. And so, people are still wanting to learn how to talk to their kids about anti-racism and just make it a family practice. So yeah,
So that's great.
lots of
So
energy.
to do that national one and to also have a St. Louis one running at the same time, has that required you to scale up, or are you just trying to just do more with the same amount of people?
It is basically the same scale that, or like it's the same scale heft that was required to do the national cohort, if that makes sense.
Mhm.
So our St. Louis community, we were at about 1,000 families already. And so with the national, just adding the national component the first time around, adding 100 families, and a lot of our work is really St. Louis contextualized.
Mhm.
And so making a shift to be like, all right, here are pathways to get involved afterwards. And also, here are ways that you can get involved in work that's happening in St. Louis, but applicable to you nationwide, has been a lot of the heft and change of thinking that we had to do for the first cohort.
Mhm.
But since that's mostly been done, it's adding to already like that ground of thinking already.
That's great. So you're all set to go. And man, what a lot of growth this program is seeing. Where do you see We Stories 5 years from now? Do you think you'll be able to run even more of these programs?
Oh my goodness, We Stories 5 years from now. I would love to imagine um, the family learning program as being a way for families to still come in and learn what suits their family best in terms of creating that habit. But I would also, I'm so wildly curious to see what this second pathway that we're building with the advocacy building project, what that turns into, especially with a national lens, because there's so many great organizations in St. Louis who are doing anti-racism work and who contribute to the field here. And I just wonder how much, like, I think that's the big opportunity and like the land of dreaming. What comes next for the like advocacy and action part?
Well, it's going to be so exciting to see, and we wish you the best as you continue this big expansion.
Thank you so much.
And we were speaking there to Rhema Anazonwu. She is the We Stories program manager, and We Stories has recently expanded from St. Louis to beyond. So thank you so much, Rhema.
Thanks, Sarah.
This is St. Louis on the Air on St. Louis Public Radio. That's 90.7 KWNU.
Support comes from the Missouri Forest Products Association, honoring Arbor Day on April 26th, with an ongoing commitment to sustainable stewardship and conservation of Missouri's forests. ChooseWood.com.